Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I am Auron MacIntyre. Before we get started today, I just want to remind you that one of the ways we keep the lights on around here is subscriptions to Blaze TV. And the great news is that Blaze TV has a fantastic Black Friday offer for you. So if you head over to blazetv.com/Auron and you use Black Friday 40 as your promo code, you're going to get $40 off 1 year of Blaze TV. That's blazetv.com/Auron, promo code Black Friday 40 to get your $40 off today. All right, guys. So I recently had a debate with Joel Berry of the Babylon Bee. It's been a long time coming. Joel and I have talked before. He's actually been on this channel originally, but for a long time we've had some disagreements on multiple levels, and Tim Pool wanted to bring us together. Now, if you've seen the debate, that you know that the debate ended up being really more of a debate between Tim Pool and Joel Berry than me and Joel Berry. Which is fine. I've been on Timcast multiple times now. It's always been a show where you've got to jump in, you've got to interrupt, you got to make yourself heard. That's just always been the nature of it. But I thought the debate would be a little more one-on-one. But let's just say that Tim went in there pretty lit. He was very, very angry, specifically at Joel Berry and the way that he has protected James Lindsay, because James has been, well, really awful to everyone, but particularly to Tim. He's lied about him just like he lies about everyone. And Joel has supported this pretty much every step of the way. So Tim came in there very fiery towards Joel. I was hoping we would have a little more exchange on the issues. While I find James to be repugnant, ultimately his personality is not what I wanted to talk about. I wasn't there to discuss the Twitter beef, as it were. I wanted to work out the foundational issues, because I think at bottom, the problem is that Joel Berry just does not understand the argument being made. And you could say that's because he's choosing not to make or to understand it. He just doesn't have the background knowledge. I'm going to err on the side of he's a comedian. This isn't his wheelhouse. It takes a lot of time for someone like that to kind of grasp what's going on here. Either way, I wanted to drill down and lay that out. And if after that Joel still had disagreements, at least I would know he had the facts and he was just making bad decisions from there. What we ended up doing was having a lot more discussion again on kind of the interpersonal nature, how Joel felt about Nick Fuentes, how Tim felt about James Lindsay. But in the middle of that, I think we did discover some very important things. So I think we did uncover some very important differences. So I think it is worth going back and talking about this disagreement. I think that while it was disappointing that we were not able to focus as much on the topics that I wanted to, and I wasn't able to say as much as I wanted to, I think that ultimately Tim did reveal some pretty critical things along with myself in cross-examination with Joel. I do feel bad. I didn't want Joel to be in a 2v1 situation. I knew Tim would kind of be on my side on this, but I did not realize how passionate Tim was about kind of the way he had been treated by James Lindsay. Again, I think Tim's entirely justified, because James has been just absolutely horrific. He's lied, he's slandered. It's completely immoral. But ultimately, while we didn't touch all the ground I wanted to, I do think that some important things were revealed. So I want to get in there and kind of break down what happened. Now, I'm not going to show you all the clips because it ended up being like 2.5 hour debate. And we still barely got to anything that we wanted to get through. So I'm just going to kind of talk about the general situation. If you want to watch the whole debate, you can. Again, it's 2.5 hours. Encourage you to do so, but there was no way I was going to be able to clip all the relevant stuff out of that for this discussion. So just know that it's there. You don't have to take my word for it. I'm going to characterize the way the things I see it, but if you want to see the original game footage to make sure that I'm not being biased, or you at least understand my bias, then it is there for you. So let's start with a few things first. The interesting thing revealed in this debate were there were a few different aspects of what was going on that were revealed during this discussion that I think are critical. So the first one is that Joel has not thought very much about his own political coalition. So one of the things that Joel has said over and over is that he does not like the way I characterize the nature of politics. I'm too Machiavellian. I point to guys like Carl Schmitt and his friend enemy distinction to describe the mechanisms of politics. Joel does not like this. He thinks that the people on my side of, I guess, the new right versus establishment conservatism debate, he doesn't like the people who happen to end up on my side. And because I'm on a side with them, I'm doing something wrong. So this is kind of the classic guilt by association. You're standing next to X, and so you must hold all of his beliefs. One of the biggest figures in this, and this is why he's in the thumbnail ultimately, is Nick Fuentes. Like, this is the big bad. This is the Voldemort. This is the scariest man in the world to Joel Berry, the most dangerous man in the world. So if you're standing anywhere in the vicinity of Nick Fuentes, you must share all of his values, all of his beliefs, all of his positions, and therefore you are morally tainted by that association. It doesn't matter if you don't hold them. It doesn't matter if you don't espouse them. It doesn't even matter if you've personally decried them. You just happen to be on the same side, and therefore you are Nick Fuentes. Everything said about Nick Fuentes applies to you. He did not think about the fact that he is guilty of everything that he was accusing people like me and Tim of being guilty of. And Tim, to Tim's great credit, Tim really drilled down on this and put Joel, I think, in a box repeatedly. So, Tim obviously went first to James Lindsay and said, hey, this is a guy that has been a new atheist. He's argued against God's existence. He's made fun of people for believing in God. And even if you think he's moved on some of the stuff, he's still, I don't want to get into James's personal life, just to say he is not living in accordance with biblical truth in certain areas. And so ultimately, this is not someone you should associate yourself with. He's lying about people constantly, spinning radical conspiracy theories, trying to get people doxxed and fired. Like, this is a very bad person that you should not be associating yourself with. And Joel's response was basically, well, James is all the things you said, but ultimately I don't care about that because he publicly espouses the things I want to believe in. So therefore, James is on my side. I don't care about his personal life or his other decisions, the other ways in which he has kind of countered what I believe in. Ultimately, because James agrees with me on a few issues, those are the things that matter. And so he's on my team. I don't really care about the rest. And what Joel doesn't understand is he is describing quite perfectly the friend enemy distinction. Or sorry, Joel doesn't understand with James, he's describing the friend enemy distinction. That there are issues at the core of their coalition, and that ultimately Joel will make allowances for really bad behavior and deeply immoral behavior as long as it's in the service of his cause. He doesn't care if James lies about Tim Pool. He doesn't care if James lies about me. He doesn't care if James goes around and tries to hurt people, get them doxxed, get them fired. None of that matters to Joel because James agrees with him. And he just laid that out there as if that was a perfectly reasonable argument. And to be fair, it is. So, again, Tim Pool astutely here pointed out that, okay, the difference between you and Auron is that Auron already admitted that and already said that, and you had to come out here and say it now, and you still don't understand why that makes you a hypocrite. Because Joel's entire argument from the beginning has been, you are guilty by association for having Nick Fuentes anywhere near you, even if you disagree with him, even if you have denounced things he said. It doesn't matter. Just because you might agree with Nick on like anti-white bigotry or certain problems with Israel, you are just guilt by association. Everything he's ever said, everything he's ever done, it's applied to you. You're guilty of all of it. Joel Berry, don't do that. My side doesn't do that. That's why we are morally better. We have principles and you don't. But what Tim really exposed is that Joel has no principles when it comes to his political coalitions. Both of us ended up pointing out that you don't see Joel Berry going after people like Dave Rubin. Now, Dave Rubin is a man who's in a gay marriage who has purchased children. He's guilty of child trafficking. He paid a woman to grow two children, birth them, and then took them for money. Dave Rubin is by every definition a child trafficker, which Joel Berry claims is something that is horrible, that he detests. However, Joel refused to say that Dave Rubin would be pushed out of the coalition. In fact, he said, as long as Dave Rubin is a constitutional conservative that believes in liberty, he can be on Joel Berry's team. Now, I may disagree pretty vehemently with some of the ways that Nick Fuentes has talked about things, the way he has treated certain people. But as far as I know, at least, he's never involved himself in human trafficking. Now, again, I could be wrong. Maybe that comes out tomorrow. And if he does, by all means, condemn, condemn, condemn. However, as far as I know, that's not been the case. So, as a Christian, while I might find some of Nick Fuentes' behavior quite awful, none of it stacks up to human trafficking. And yet, Joel Berry is more than okay to put someone like Dave Rubin on his side and to say, yes, of course, he's part of the coalition. As long as he agrees with the friend-enemy distinction, as long as he agrees with the central premise that defines the coalition, then I will excuse any other bad behavior he has, because Joel doesn't have any principles when it comes to political coalitions. Whoever agrees with him is on his side, and whoever isn't, well, they're not. And he doesn't care about the personal behavior. He doesn't have some abstract principle about who can be on his side or not. He doesn't have some absolute morality guiding his political coalition building. Dave Rubin agrees with Joel. Let's be frank. He agrees with Joel on Israel mainly. And so he's good. Joel Berry's not going to write any jokes about blowing up Dave Rubin with a pager. He's not going to do any of that kind of stuff to Dave Rubin because Dave Rubin is part of his friend coalition. Despite his child trafficking, it just doesn't matter. And Joel said repeatedly that he doesn't care what Dave Rubin does in his private life as long as he publicly espouses whatever the principle is that Joel cares about. So again, this is fine. This is how political coalitions work. I understood this. That's what I was trying to explain to Joel. You are working in the exact way I told you you would work. You believe and act politically the same way I explained to you that you would act. Your actions are predictable because I have studied political theory, and there is a way in which politics works. I'm not judging you for it. I'm not attacking you for it. I understand how and why you got to the place where you put a Dave Rubin in your coalition. I disagree with it, but I understand it. But Joel does not get it. He does not understand the mechanics of politics. He does not get the dynamics that influence political decisions. Again, that's fine. He's a comedian. But when you spend all your time attacking people online, saying they are unprincipled because of the people they are in a coalition with, and he is principled because of the people he is in a coalition with, and then you reveal that actually you have zero principles and will just go with anyone who agrees with you on a specific issue, and you do not care in any way, shape, or form how they behave. I mean, this is the Sam Harris thing, right? Sam Harris says, yeah, I may have spent my entire last 5 years talking about the evils of censorship and how we have to have free and open discussion. But, if the news media wants to censor Donald Trump and lie and shut down just so Joe Biden can win, I don't care if Joe Biden has 15 children stacked dead bodies in his basement. It doesn't matter. The principles, I don't have principles as long as he agrees with me on this thing. And Joel Berry had pretty much the exact same approach. I don't care. I don't care if Dave Rubin has bought 15 children. The point is he agrees with me politically, and so therefore he can be in my coalition. And again, this is not me denouncing Joel Berry for that decision, because I understand how political coalitions work. What I am judging is the fact that Joel Berry has run around for a very long time saying, I have principles and you don't. And the evidence is that the people on my side are good people who I have chosen because they have these principles in common with me. And you don't do that, and you'll just do whatever it takes to win. But when you drill down, actually, Joel is fine with having deeply immoral, deeply sinister people, child traffickers on his side, as long as they agree with him on certain issues, as long as publicly they espouse these issues. And he did this weird sidestep where he's like, well, but Dave doesn't publicly announce his surrogacy, which he absolutely has. He doesn't publicly celebrate it. He doesn't publicly push it. Well, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, if you buy this, children, and then you announce it online and you talk about the difficulties of parenting, you go and have a podcast with Jordan Peterson about the being a new parent, and you're treated on the Daily Wire as if that's just normal or something. Actually, I don't think Jordan Peterson was on the Daily Wire at that point, but so I shouldn't say that. But if you are just treated as if that is a normal thing at the time, then you can't act like you're not approving of it in some way. Like, yeah, this guy's literally on an apology tour for his purchase of children with some of the biggest conservative influencers in the world. Yeah, I think that's advertising surrogacy. Gay surrogacy. I think that's advertising child trafficking. So I think you can comfortably say, yes, he is involved in publicly espousing this worldview. So then we got to this other weird place where Joel said, well, you need to understand. And he goes to C.S. Lewis's explanation of the Tao, which I tried not to be too mean about. I've read quite a bit of C.S. Lewis, but he goes to C.S. Lewis's explanation of the Tao, and he says, well, there's this Tao, there's this natural law. And as long as you're working within the natural law, you're on the side of good. And if you're working against the natural law, then you're not on the side of good. And it doesn't matter if you say you're a Christian, or even if you're living a Christian life, you're espousing Christianity, you're raising your children in Christianity, you are out there evangelizing and doing works on behalf of Christianity. If you don't agree with Joel Berry, then you're not following the natural law. You're not following the Tao. And if you are James Lindsay or Dave Rubin, and you're violating like all of the natural laws, like all of them, but you agree with Joel Berry, then you are following the Tao, and therefore you are Christian, right? And so Joel Berry has created this litmus test by which he's the Pope. Like, he decides who is Christian and who is not. I'm not even kidding. That was his assertion. Like, he gets to decide whether or not someone is living in the way of Christ. And Dave, Dave Rubin and James Lindsay are, and everyone that he doesn't like isn't. And this was separate from the debate, but honestly, I saw it after, and I was a little disgusted, to be honest. I saw that Joel Berry had called a bunch of people I know to be good and faithful Christians pagan because they didn't agree with him. So he's been trying to form this new phrase, pagan right, since every other smear he's come up with is not working. And so the pagan right, he's just saying you're not Christians. And he knows that's what he's saying, but he lied about it. He lied about it to my face. He went on about the pagan right while we were debating. And then I laid out to him the ways in which I was espousing Christianity that he was not. And I said, tell me how you are a real Christian and I am not a Christian, even though I am espousing these things. And he said, oh, no, I didn't mean you. But of course he did. He was trying to include me in that coalition. So he just kind of lied to my face. And then he also went online and called a bunch of guys like William Wolfe and Nate Fisher, who I know to be Christian men who are raising, William Wolfe's raising a family. He's running a leadership foundation for Southern Baptists. This is a Christian man. He just disagrees with Joel Berry. But Joel can tell William he's no longer a Christian because he disagrees with James Lindsay. Because actually, it seems like James Lindsay gets to decide who's Christian in Joel Berry's universe, which is amazing, truly amazing. So Tim did a really good job, again, of pushing him into this corner and saying, look, you have to think about the way you are building political coalitions. You can't turn around and look at guys like me or Auron and say, what you're doing has no principles and is immoral, but I am a morally upstanding person because I get to decide what Christianity is. And I can just kind of attribute Christianity to child traffickers and polygamous new atheists, but I can take it away from like dedicated Christian fathers, depending on how they feel about my political assertions, which was just gross. And obviously he got beat up for it pretty bad, rightly so. But he never walked away from it. He just kept repeating that. So the next thing I think that's valuable to drill down on is that Joel has not thought very carefully about the positions he is defending, which I think is kind of obvious for anyone who's watched him do so. But when pressed on the issue of like what he and James Lindsay do share, or he and Dave Rubin do share, the thing he kept saying is, well, they believe in liberty. They're pro liberty. They're constitutional conservatives. And so Tim and I said, okay, but you recognize that if your whole premise is we have to return to the Constitution, you need to tell me what version of the Constitution, because the 1790 Constitution is very different than the Articles of Confederation, and the Constitution post Civil War is very different than the 1790 Constitution. The 14th Amendment radically changes the way that we look at it. It basically abolishes the 10th Amendment. Then we have the addition of the incorporation doctrine after World War II, which again radically changes our understanding of federalism. And then we have the Civil Rights Act. And all of these things are revolutions inside the form. Technically, we still have the Constitution. But the way that we understand that Constitution changes. And the weird thing is that Joel accepted that premise because it's obviously true and he can't argue against it. Tim brought up multiple points where, we still had state churches up until the 1840s, I believe. Blasphemy laws were on the books well in to the 1900s. These, blue laws, all these things that technically violate free speech and the free market and separation of church and state as it's currently understood, the way that I think Joel basically defends it, those things were not in the original Constitution. We have added them over time. And it's very clear that Joel did not want to go back to the actual founding. Like, he doesn't want to go back to the immigration laws of 1790, which restrict immigration in the United States to free white men of good character. He doesn't want to go back to only, white guys who are the heads of households or own land voting. Like, he doesn't want to go back to the founding. So if Joel doesn't want to go back to the founding, the original Constitution, what version of the Constitution does he want to go back to? And Joel just didn't have an answer. He said, well, I just don't know. And you can't just not know when your entire argument is we have to do this. This is the only way forward. The only way forward is to go back to these things. But you don't know what you're arguing for. Because Joel Berry is fundamentally progressive in his understanding of the Constitution. He believes that the original Constitution is insufficient. He does not agree with the Constitution or its understanding in 1790. He doesn't want there to be legal. He doesn't want blasphemy laws. He doesn't want immigration restriction to European men of good character. He does not want those things. So what he wants is something down the line that we progressed to. He thinks the original Constitution was flawed, and he thinks that we need a different version of the Constitution. Not the one we have now, not the one all the way in 2025, but certainly not the one we had in 1790. And no matter how many times we asked, Joel could not give us a date or a version of the Constitution, a principle that he was comfortable with for like the final version of the Constitution. And if your entire argument is we have to go back to this this document and this thing, I'm about the American tradition, I believe in American principles, but you can't actually tell me which principles or what time, then you simply don't, you're just slandering people. You're trying to claim a tradition you don't understand. You don't have an appreciation for. You don't have any roots in. I honestly think that the Constitution Joel Berry wants is the Schoolhouse Rock version. Maybe not even that one, because that one was around in what? Schoolhouse Rock is the 1960s. He wouldn't have been okay with what was going on then, right? So I think Joel Berry at best wants 1990s Bill Clinton Constitution, or maybe the 1980s Ronald Reagan. He'd probably be more comfortable with that. But I think when Joel wants to return to American tradition or the founding fathers, he means Ronald Reagan. He certainly doesn't mean John Adams. He certainly doesn't mean Alexander Hamilton, who was talking about how he wanted the president to be king for life until the next one got elected when he died. So he certainly wasn't talking about Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Jefferson's belief on race. So I guess the problem is that Joel is just not familiar. And again, he's a comedian. That's okay. He doesn't have to know all these things, but he gets so angry and he denounces people's Christianity and says they're wicked and unprincipled, but he doesn't even know the principles he's arguing for. He can't name them. He can't identify what period of the Constitution he would go back to. What America is he looking to return to? He doesn't know that answer. The other thing he kept saying was liberty. I agree with liberty. And I pointed out very quickly that the type of liberty he agrees with is not the type of liberty that James Lindsay believes in. James Lindsay's liberty is a libertine one. This is not a man who believes in Christian social teaching. So when he says liberty, that's not a clear enough definition. I also believe in liberty. I believe in ordered liberty. I believe in a Aristotelian understanding of liberty. But Joel's version of liberty just doesn't have a grounding, because I point out, Joel, liberty for libertarians means the ability to get married to 4 women or do meth or, be gay married while growing pot. I don't think that's what you mean by liberty. And he agreed. But he couldn't define what he did mean by liberty, because Joel has not thought through this. And ultimately, this ties to another problem. So again, he's a comedian. He doesn't need to understand this stuff if he just stays in his lane. But if you're going to go swinging in here, I'm sorry, I don't want to pull the expertise or I've read the books, but at some point it matters whether you understand the topic you're discussing. If Joel is making coherent arguments, I'm not gonna Douglas Murray him. Have you ever been to the Constitution? I'm not going to demand that he has degrees or that he has certifications, but he has to at least make coherent arguments. That means he understands the background, right? Like Scott Horton, I don't think he has a degree in anything, or if he does, it's like a bachelor somewhere. He's certainly not teaching a professor somewhere, but Scott Horton has an encyclopedic knowledge of wars in the Middle East. He just does. You can like him or hate him, but he knows his stuff. Even the people who hate him know that he's going to blow them away with his encyclopedic memory when it comes to this topic. Joel has not done that. He has not immersed himself in the literature. He has not made himself look. I have a bachelor's degree in political science from a party school in Florida. I don't have any fancy doctorates. I'm a layman who read a bunch of books, right? But I think people have recognized that I've accumulated enough knowledge to speak at least at a level that's worthy of people to listen to me on this topic. Joel has not familiarized himself. And so the interesting thing is that Joel, because he has not defined any of these terms, he's not familiar with political science, he's not familiar with philosophy, rather than debate these issues, he just gets angry at you for having to read philosophers he knows are the no boys, right? It's again, just guilt by association. He doesn't understand Carl Schmitt or Nick Land or Curtis Yarvin or Joseph de Maistre or any of these people. He hasn't read them. He hasn't paid attention. He hasn't gone back and read Aristotle. He doesn't have Machiavelli under his belt. Again, all okay. He's a comedian. He doesn't have to do that stuff. But then he gets angry when someone else does. When someone else has that knowledge, he's like, well, no. We can't be reading books. Books are bad. We don't read books around here. I told you who Christians are. They're the people who agree with me. So if you're trying to bring any of that philosophy in there, well, you're probably a bad actor. It kind of reminds me, honestly, again, of kind of the Sam Harris, like the new atheist approach, which this whole movement being attached to James Lindsay should sound familiar. James Lindsay's running the new atheist playbook against Christians again. It's just the same thing. And Joel Berry's an accomplice. He follows his lead, which, Tim pointed out repeatedly. Tim said, that all James Lindsay does is infiltrate movements and subvert them. And he's literally tweeted out that that's what he's doing with Christianity. You can find the tweet. I'm not making this up. I probably should have. That's the one thing I should have been ready to cite. But he has said this before. And Joel's just like, well, it's fine because currently he's attacking people that I don't like. And it became very clear that Joel he's not going to engage with these arguments or these philosophers. He's just going to say, you're a bad person for having done so. And again, it reminds me of the New Atheist Playbook, because if you go back and watch Sam Harris or, some of these guys first interact with Jordan Peterson or others, they don't know what to do because they're used to just being like, oh, well, Christians, they're dumb and it's all dumb. It's all Bronze Age mythology. So I don't need to think about it. But guys like Jordan Peterson, again, however you feel ultimately about Jordan Peterson, are well read in philosophy and psychology. They're going to bring an academic discipline. They're going to talk about it in an interesting and thoughtful way. And Sam Harris was just not ready for that because he's used to just saying, well, I'm a biologist and I say that, God, I can't find your spaghetti monster in the sky. I have no biological evidence for spaghetti monsters. So Christianity, no real. But, a guy like Jordan Peterson is going to introduce the idea of epistemology. He's going to say, no, there's a way to understand truth that is not as simple as you are laying out. And this is actually a classic traditional way to understand truth. And we're better we're better served by this understanding. It's more holistic. And Sam can't allow that understanding of truth. He can't allow the context of philosophy and religion and psychology into his world because Sam Harris built his entire world on this new atheist materialistic premise. He needs you to limit epistemology to science. Because if you acknowledge a wider epistemology, then Sam Harris's entire argument breaks down. His entire argument is basically science is the only way to know anything. And since I have the high ground in science, you are irrelevant. And that's kind of Joel and by proxy, James Lindsay's argument. Is like the only way that we are allowed to address this stuff is through this very narrow lens of carefully curated understandings of constitutions and politics. And if you step outside of that, if you provide any context, if you're bringing in Aristotle and Aquinas, if you're bringing in Joseph de Maistre, if you're bringing in Thomas Carlyle, if you're bringing in all of these other thinkers, and you're widening that understanding of politics, you're providing too much context, then it's quickly going to become clear that this, this kind of really simple Schoolhouse Rock version of politics doesn't work, and that it's ignorant for us to pretend like this is sufficient. So the only thing they can really do is kind of throw out these shallow bromides. I'm for constitutional conservatism. I believe in liberty. I believe in truth. But they have to reject when you start to drill down on any of that stuff. Oh, that's postmodern. That's deconstruction. No, I don't think Aristotle is postmodern, actually. Sorry, I don't think that's actually true. I'm sorry, I don't think Joseph de Maistre was postmodern. In fact, I think he was probably a much more doctrinaire Christian than you are. I don't think you have context. I don't think you have context for how politics works. I don't think you have context for how Christianity actually was governed. And you can kind of tell that by the next thing I want to talk about, which was Joel Berry's solutions. It became very clear that ultimately Joel didn't have any solutions. When Tim and I pressed him on like, okay, well, how would you fix this? He's like, well, we just need to have a conversation and the truth will win out. Oh, so we're back to the marketplace of ideas again? We're just doing that. Because how's that been working? Where's the evidence that that's true? Well, there is none. But Joel has no other arguments. He doesn't, his worldview does not allow for effective politics. His worldview is designed to lose. He is a beautiful loser. He doesn't allow discussions of power. He doesn't allow discussions of tactics. And I kid you not, this was his real response. We have to just pray and wait for spiritual revival. Okay, look, I'm a Christian. I think we should read our Bibles. I think we should pray. And I also want spiritual revival. And I do agree that ultimately, if that came, that would solve many of our problems. But this is just not how any Christian magistrate throughout history has behaved. If you have any historical context to the way any Christians acted previously, they would all kind of laugh at Joel Berry here. Like, no, Christians took political action. They took power. This is, of course, true in America. What if the founders had just said, you know what? I think the king is doing some bad things. I think that the loyalists are wrong. But ultimately, it's all about prayer and spiritual, it's all about prayer and spiritual revival. If we just read our Bibles enough, King George will go away. If we just read our Bibles enough, the redcoats will leave. If we just, read our Bible enough, they will recognize that we need certain inalienable rights, that Americans live in a particular way and deserve to be governed by their own people, their own representation. Like, what if they had actually done that? There were certainly people who were advocating for that, but Joel would never say the founders were sinful or wicked for recognizing that no, you had to take an action. Yeah, like the civil magistrates recognized that the way in which things were being conducted is no longer within the good of the people, and they said we have to throw off the current government and create a new one. And they literally killed people over it. So the idea that the only Christian answer to, political disagreements is like just pray harder about it. Well, then Joel Berry's just denouncing like large chunks of the Christian tradition, including the founding fathers. Now, anytime we brought up any of this kind of stuff, he would just say, well, that's war. That's war. Well, it wasn't a war until it was. Founders didn't have to go to war over this. They chose to. And I think they were right to. I think that ultimately, however you feel about revolutions and monarchy, the English crown had lost the mandate of heaven in the United States. They had simply lost their authority in the United States and they deserved to be replaced. But I mean, let's be honest, the tyranny happening in America at that time is far less than the tyranny happening in America today. So if it's just about listing the grievances, well, then I think we've got a pretty good justification to say we have the grievances now. So I don't think that's what Joel wants to ultimately argue, but he has no real effective solution. His answer is just pray harder. And this reminds me of a story my pastor told once. A man and woman, their house is on fire in the middle of the night, and they wake up panicked. They start running around. They grab their 2 kids. They grab their dog. They grab, a priceless artifact. They run outside, and they realize that one of their children is still trapped upstairs. The mother and father hit their knees, and they start praying, oh God, please come and save our child. Our child is trapped up there. The house is on fire. Please do a miracle and save him from this fire. And then their neighbor walked by and grabbed the ladder off the side of the house and put it against the window and walked up the ladder and grabbed the child, pulled him out of the window, and delivered them to the ground. I think the point of the story is obvious. There's nothing wrong with praying. There's nothing wrong with being a Christian. You should rely on God. But also, you are God's instrument. Like, Christians have a duty to do the thing, not just pray about it. So yes, pray for political change and then make it happen. Yes, pray for social change, but then make it happen. Yes, pray for your country, but then do things that make it better, including winning elections and wielding political power. Just saying, oh, well, we can't think about power because we're Christians. I mean, come on, man. What are we doing here? This is just insane. And I don't ultimately think that Joel believes that. Like, I don't think that he thinks that Christians shouldn't wield power. He just doesn't like the people who are effectively doing it right now. And that's the real problem. So all these arguments about principle seem to crumble pretty quickly when Joel needs to establish a political coalition, or Joel needs to censor people, or Joel needs to affect political change. It's really just about the friend-enemy distinction. He doesn't like the people on the other side, and so when they do it, it's wrong, and when he does it, it's right. And that seems to be the entirety of the discussion. And so there was, just this constant dead end when it got to, okay, but how do you actually do this? What does this really look like? How does this bear out? And I just don't think that Joel has thought very deeply about that. And I wish that was what we had spent more of our time on. I didn't want to spend all my time on James Lindsay or Nick Fuentes. I didn't want to spend all my time debating who said what and who was mean to who. I mean, again, don't get me wrong. James is a vile person who has, lied repeatedly about Tim. I totally get why Tim was angry at it. He had every right to pop off and, frankly, to call out Joel Berry's hypocrisy and associating with a guy he knows lies on a regular basis, who he has admitted lies on a regular basis, and who he never chastises. Like, Joel Berry isn't going after James Lindsay for lying about Tim Pool or me, but that's because Joel does the same thing. Because, well, it's okay when they do it because friend enemy, right? That is what defines Joel's morality inside of political coalitions. So I do think this was, again, while I think that ultimately this was not the debate I wanted to have, it was illustrative of some pretty critical holes in Joel Berry's arguments. He doesn't care about principles and political coalitions. He just doesn't like your political coalition. He doesn't care about people's private lives or how they conduct themselves or even what they say in public as long as they're on his team. James Lindsay can lie about people. He can come up with conspiracy theories about me being an angel summoner and working secretly with the Catholic Church to produce demons. He can call Tim Pool a Marxist plant sent there to subvert the right. And Joel's not going to say anything. He's not going to say, oh, cross the line too far. Can't associate myself with James. There is no principle there. That is not a principle. Sorry, it's just not. And that's okay. Again, I understand how political coalitions work. But you can't then tell me you're moral because you're following the rules. You have the one ability to discern who's Christian and who's not, and therefore you get to declare non-Christians Christians, child traffickers in line with Christ's teaching. But guys like William Wolfe are beyond the pale. They're pagan, right? William Wolfe is a pagan for Joel Berry, but Dave Rubin, that's a man following the way of Christ because constitutional conservatism or something. And this is the problem again, is Joel Berry will say things like, well, these guys are classical liberals. Dave Rubin and James Lindsay, they're classical liberals. But no, they're not. They're not even close. You want to show Dave Rubin's lifestyle to John Locke? You want to show James Lindsay's what he said about Christianity and his lifestyle to many of the founding fathers? You think they would make it out of a room? Like, no, these people are not in any way classical liberals, right? Like, it's not even close. They're at best 1990s liberals. And even then, no, not really. Because even Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton had to stand out against gay marriage. None of these people are classical liberal. And remember, James voted, as far as I understand, worked on a campaign, like, calling people or knocking doors or something for Barack Obama, voted for Hillary Clinton. And somehow he gets to decide who's on the conservative movement. And he is basically spoon feeding Joel Berry tactics. And this relationship is very strange. I wonder if ultimately Joel feels like he needs to rely on James for some level of intellectual heft. Like, James is providing the intellectual arguments that Joel Berry doesn't know how to make, which is already embarrassing because James is very bad at that. But he's better than Joel. So is that why he needs him? Like, he needs that firepower. That's what he brings to the table, I guess. God help you if that's the case, that James Lindsay is your intellectual firepower. But maybe that is the extent of the relationship. Now, one thing that we didn't talk about very much, and in a way, I'm glad we didn't, because it would have probably eaten up the whole thing. But we didn't talk about Israel, which is, I think, a big point of contention for James and Joel. In fact, I literally think it is their friend enemy distinction. I think that honestly is just what draws the line. Like, if you agree with them on this, then you're fine, and it doesn't matter what else you believe. And so ultimately, I'm glad we didn't bring it up because it probably would have dragged down the conversation. We would have gotten lost in the nuances of that. And I honestly would like to talk about Israel as little as possible. But you could feel that sitting in the background the whole time. That ultimately that was kind of an elephant in the room that was not addressed. Ultimately, probably better that it didn't. It probably would have pulled the whole thing apart. But I do think it's worth mentioning that that does feel like the true difference there that they didn't address. That said, Joel and I have been in contact. He is interested in doing another debate where him and I have the majority of the debate. There's not a third party who's jumping in and having a large amount of input. We've been bouncing around venues and possible moderators. So I'm hoping that works out. I would like to have a direct one-on-one. I will say this: in person, Joel was perfectly kind, perfectly cordial. Um, I'm sure Joel Berry is a good dad and a good husband. Honestly, like and that says a lot about a man. So I think that's probably the case. I think that just when it comes to politics, he does not understand the nature of them and falls into exactly the behavior he thinks he's attacking, but he thinks it's fine because he's doing it on the other side. I genuinely think he's blind to the fact that he and James Lindsay behave exactly in the way that he's angry about the Groypers' behavior. I think he genuinely thinks the bad behavior only flows one direction, or if there is bad behavior on his side, it's fine because ultimately he's on the side of truth and justice and, you know, what he thinks is Christianity, which I guess is Dave Rubin sometimes. But he that's how he sees it. I disagree vehemently. I think that's wrong. I think that's morally corrupt. But I think he's probably a good guy in the other aspects of his life, which again, politics isn't everything. So um, that matters quite a bit. But I do think that ultimately we should come back together and have this discussion and work this out. So I hope that that does happen. I think that a conversation in which I can really nail down these particular issues and kind of get him to attempt to answer those questions would be one in which I think we would gain far more clarity. Though, again, like I said, as much as it was a little frustrating to be the spectator for Tim's debate with Joel, I do think that Tim brought him to some contradictions that he was not able to overcome. And I think that laid bare, unfortunately, for Joel, some real, I don't even say hypocrisy because I don't think he's even considered it. Like, I just genuinely think he doesn't grasp that the way he and James conduct themselves is analogous to the Groypers. Like, it really is. Like, that's how most people see them. And he could not see that because he spends all day yelling at these people online. I don't even know if he writes jokes for the Bee at this point. He just yells at these people online all day, which, you know, that'll drive anyone crazy. Yelling at Groypers all day online will drive you insane, no matter how you feel about it one way or the other. So I guess I can see how he gets there, even if ultimately it has blinded him quite deeply. All right, guys, we have quite a bit of questions here in the super chat, so I should start on those. Fritz Imperial says it's ridiculous to go over if Dave advocates for surrogacy when his actual purchase of a child signals his support more than words ever could. Well, yes, exactly right. Obviously, Dave Rubin has advocated for surrogacy, and his biggest advocacy is engaging in it. He is living that out. He's also, again, been on multiple large conservative broadcasts explaining, why he's done that and how he's done it and all the struggles of being a double dad or whatever. So it really is clear that that is something that he supports and has vocalized. And yet again, Megyn Kelly, who the Babylon Bee wrote a joke about, Israel murdering her over her disagreeing with Joel Berry on this stuff. They would never write a joke about someone blowing up Dave Rubin and Megyn Kelly for talking after, he advocated for surrogacy. And that just kind of tells you where the priorities are, right? Like he obviously thinks that one of these things is fine and one of them isn't. Or at the very least, he might object to it, but he's willing to look past it as long as they agree basically on Israel. Megyn Kelly disagrees with Joel on Israel, so she gets jokes about getting blown up. Dave Rubin doesn't disagree with Joel on Israel, so he can buy as many children as he wants. No jokes about him getting blown up. No jokes about Megyn Kelly getting blown up for talking to him. It all goes one way. And Joel's like, oh, no, we're equal. No, not equal parts on everybody. It's very clear what you're favoring. You're sending a message and you're using your comedy platform to send a specific message. You are targeting specific people for a specific reason. And it's obvious because you deleted it because Megyn Kelly called you out on it. So it's just kind of obvious that, trying to somehow rationalize putting Dave Rubin in your coalition as a member in good standing, while also then saying like Nick Fuentes is beyond the pale. Again, I agree, there's a lot wrong with Nick Fuentes, but he's not purchasing children. That's worse. That's just objectively worse. Sorry. Like, that doesn't make what Nick is saying okay, but sorry, it's just not the same. Manayud says, part of me really liked seeing Tim chew out Joel on his squishy hypocrisy, but I really wish you had a chance to walk them through why liberalism is flawed. Oh, well, maybe next time. Yeah, again, while it was frustrating to some extent, Tim really did nail Joel down. Joel just didn't have a lot of answers for Tim. Now, I would not have made all of the arguments Tim made. I think some of Tim's arguments were flawed. I would have made them differently, and then I would have, I think you can probably hit the James Lindsay's a bad actor thing for 10, 15 minutes and move on. And Tim kind of made that most of the discussion, but he had every right to be angry at both men. His criticisms were largely accurate, and I think he did intelligently box Joel in a few times there that Joel just had no answer for. So honestly, I feel kind of pretty confident I could do the same. Let's see here. Darth Amalgamation said, did you see the invitation for a rematch from Christian and Nick? Joel has shown interest. I did, and you probably sent that before I mentioned it. We've received opportunities to kind of have this second debate from several different people. I'm down. I'm as long as it's relatively neutral ground, I'm fine with doing that. I even suggested actually that Joel take that offer because Nick is friends with James Lindsay, and I think Christian, his co-host, is much more of my persuasion. So it'd kind of be one moderator who's sympathetic to each side. So I think that'd probably be a pretty good balance, as opposed to like me and Tim, against Joel. Tim being extremely fiery. I think that would probably be a situation where we would get a fair hearing. But Joel just has to kind of decide which platform he like I said, he has said he's interested in doing it again. So we'll just have to figure out where we're going to take that. Adam6425 says, taking Barry at his word, those like Rubin may not advocate sodomy or child trafficking politically, but neither do they advocate for their abolition. Yeah, again, you think that would be a pretty damning indictment. And this is, again, the problem. It's very clear that Joel has principles, but those principles only go one way, right? And this is what I'm trying to explain. I want principles in politics. I think we need principles. I'm not against principles. But it is very clear that Joel's principles are not really particularly robust. Like, he will make allowances for pretty heinous behavior to form a political coalition. And to be fair, so will I, because I think that that's part of politics. As I pointed out during the debate, in World War II, we allied ourselves with Stalin, a mass murderer, anti-Christian, guilty for murdering tons of Christians. We allied ourselves with him against Hitler. Then we bombed, we firebombed Dresden, we firebombed Tokyo, and then we dropped 2 nukes, right? That is sometimes the way that the world works. Does that mean that Americans didn't have principles? Does it mean that American soldiers didn't have principles? Is Joel going to say that all the guys fighting in World War II were unprincipled? I don't think so. And I don't think he would, because I think he'll make common cause with guys like Dave at a drop of a hat if it serves his political coalition. That's fine. I can make alliances with Tucker Carlson. That's fine. I'm not trying to hit Joel on the hypocrisy of making alliances. I'm hitting him on the hypocrisy of saying, well, your alliance building is immoral, but mine is moral. Why? Because I have the ability to dictate who's Christian or not. And even though the people on your side are Christian men with families raising the next generation of Christians, they're actually pagans. And even though the people on my side are like buying babies from their mothers to raise them in a gay marriage, we're the side of truth and Christianity. Okay, man, I think you just have a political coalition that's about as principled as mine, which is to say it's interested in moving an agenda down the field. We can debate those agendas. I'm fine with doing that. But don't tell me that you're somehow the true Christian who has real principles when you have James Lindsay and Dave Rubin on your side. You you don't. So just be honest about it. Let's just all be honest. Cherry Coke Nixon says, we're now in month 2 of this mentally ill circle jerk exercise between the dissident right and Con Inc. While Dems are focused on affordability and hiding their wokeness in the closet. Can we move on? Yes, I would like to largely move on. I hope it has been clear recently that my content has shifted away from this as much as possible and trying to focus on the left. Ultimately, however, there is a really big problem, and this is one we can't avoid. I want to do what you're saying. I promise. I really do. However, it is very clear that there is an insurgent attempt to turn the neocons to power inside the right. They are targeting JD Vance, and Tucker is just a wedge for JD Vance. We saw this in the Heritage Foundation. We saw this in the Intercollegiate Studies Institute. The old Mitt Romney, John McCain, Jeb Bush, neocon faction is fighting to return. They're fighting to return Mike Pence's and Mitt Romney's to the presidency. That's happening right now. And I don't think they're going to give up. They see this as their opportunity. That's why it doesn't matter how small or obscure the institution is. You guys probably didn't even know about ISI unless you saw some of their commercials on my show a year or two ago. But even in those smaller institutions that are relatively unimportant to the major operation of the Republican Party, the long knives are out. They're coming for the MAGA guys. They're coming for the new right guys. They see this as their time. So I don't want to go on about this, but honestly, I don't know that we can stop them from trying to unseat the MAGA changes, from trying to roll back the Trump changes. I think they want to go back to the old Republican Party, and they're willing to do anything they can. Guys like Max Abrams have made this very clear. They kind of gave the game away and announced directly, we're going after JD Vance. We're getting rid of the new right. So I don't really know what to do. Yes, I would rather not discuss this, but I can't go after the left if these guys are knifing me in the back, right? Like I can't face my enemy if the people who are my allies are literally trying to destroy lives, get people fired, get people doxxed, drive them out of the movement, ruin their lives. Like I don't know what to do at that point. At some point you have to turn and fight. You can't just keep getting punched in the back of the head. Let's see here. Water Voids, is that what sorry, hard to pronounce that name there. It says, Auron, are you going to cover the Florida governor's race at all? The guy that establishment Republicans are trying to force through is awful. Yeah, I can go into that. I tend not to do horse race politics, but that's probably something worth my time. I am a Florida resident. I'm familiar with the players you're talking about. So maybe I will dive into that here eventually. Proper 64 gamer, I think. In a way, that was the best pod we could have asked for when from Joel, he was exposed as an unprincipled midwit, but all of his friends are, but all his friends are anyway. What changes? Again, I think it just exposed that Joel had not thought deeply about his own side. He argued against all of the, you don't have principles. I disagree with Machiavellian politics. I disagree with the friend enemy distinction. And then he laid out piece by piece why actually he's practicing it to a T. So and he had not thought about it. He had not thought about the fact that people would look at the coalition he had assembled just as negatively as the one that he was attacking. It simply had not occurred to him. And I think that was very evident. Elijah Timons says, for people who reject the friend enemy politics, everything, and for people who accept friend enemy politics, the law, basically Joel Berry. Yeah, again, it was very obviously laid out by Joel that while he opposes all of the political theory I'm espousing, he's actually following it piece by piece. He is using my playbook. He and James Lindsay are the most effective and vicious promoters of their friend enemy distinction you can imagine. They will engage in it. They will lay it out and they will justify it. Again, I think he just had not thought about this. K-Max McDonald, Auron, did you burn out on the James Lindsay talk during the debate? How much in your view is James Lindsay still relevant? Has he burned all his bridges is now with everyone so best to ignore him? Yeah, so this is another reason. If you watch the debate, you'll see me at least 3 times say, can we please stop talking about James Lindsay? He's the least important part of this debate. He's the least relevant part of this debate. And unfortunately, like I said, Tim just wanted to go back to it over and over again. I think you're right. I think James has largely made himself irrelevant. As I said early on, anybody who lashes themselves to James in this is just going to go down with the ship. And I think that's kind of what's happening here. I don't think you have to make a whole lot more arguments about why James is wrong. I think kind of everybody gets it except for a very specific faction of people who are really desperate to get us back to kind of Barack Obama, Mitt Romney politics. That's obviously what James wants to do, and the people who are left that want to do that like to use James as a way to kind of back that up. They feel there's some level of intellectual boistering, I guess, with whatever James is providing. But yeah, I think for the most part, he has burned out his relevance, and if at all possible, I hope that when Joel Berry and I have another discussion, we just never talk about James Lindsay again. Proper 64 again says, also, what are we, the actual right wing, trying to win here? Vanquish our woke dumb enemies, or are we trying to win the culture? Separate issues. I'm trying to figure out exactly what you mean in that. If you mean in like the overall discussion, or like the discussion between me and Joel, I mean, we want to defeat our enemies, and we also want to win the culture. They are separate issues, but they are also overlapping, right? So winning the culture matters, but winning a lead opinion matters to win the culture, and vice versa. These things are in ways symbiotic. I think the culture on the culture side, in the conservative movement, we're winning that discussion. I think in general, while there are still plenty of people who probably would side with Joel on some level, if you talk to anyone under 40, they kind of completely reject this. The institutions are another matter. They tend to be more entrenched with neocons and establishment figures, and it's going to take a while. Generational turnover will eventually get them, but I don't know if we have long enough to wait for kind of the millennials and Zoomers to move in, even some of the Gen Xers. So I guess the answer is on all fronts. Wild Speaker says the fact is that Joel is a liberal. He's just unhappy with the latest liberal patch notes. He's a conservative conserving 90s liberalism. Yeah, I know Joel probably wouldn't like that characterization, but I think it's right. I think ultimately Joel is defending the liberal order and is a liberal to his core. And this is why he is often, it seems like he is disingenuous or confused about these things, because he believes, and I meant to say this earlier, so I'm glad you brought it up. He believes that kind of the 90s liberal, or maybe the 80s liberal tradition is Christianity, which is why he thinks guys like Dave Rubin and James Lindsay are more Christian than guys like William Wolfe, because he thinks that is Christianity. Like being an American liberal from the 80s or 90s is Christian, and he's conflating those two. And that's a very serious problem, because that's not what Christianity is. Maniyud says, if the conservatism you, Joel, idolize failed to conserve anything, what use was the conservatism? Again, I brought this up to him I brought this up to him in the debate, and he didn't really have an answer to it. I said, the conservative movement has failed. And he said, really? I'm like, yeah, they don't have anything for these people. It's like, what do you mean? They fought for this stuff. It's like, Joel, we just got to the point where like 3 years ago, you were allowed to say that there's anti-white discrimination. We got maybe 2 years, a few years before that, we got the idea that there was a war on men and it was okay to talk about it, that Christians were being attacked and it was okay to talk about it. These were things that were not part of the conservative movement previously. And we just got this, into the conservative movement. So if we had a successful conservative movement beforehand, why do we keep having these problems? Why are we just getting to these issues? And he just didn't really have any response to that. The Sanity Revolt says, Rubin says in his book, their surrogacy contract included a clause requiring abortion if birth defects were detected. So again, I don't know anything about that, but yeah, that's why I said, oh, well, I'm sure Dave Rubin has talked about this quite a bit at length. And if that's the case, then yeah, that's even more evil and ghoulish. And you're not going to hear Joel Berry throwing Dave Rubin out of his coalition. You're just not. There's not going to be any jokes in the Babylon Bee about blowing Megyn Kelly up for talking to a man who was going to have the children he was purchasing murdered if they had the wrong genetics. That's eugenics. That's child trafficking. That's degeneracy and homosexuality. And Joel's just not going to say anything. And he's not going to make jokes about blowing people up. about it, like he's not going to do any of this stuff because he's fine with it as long as they serve his political coalition. Manayud here with James Lindsay's tweet that I was referencing. Thank you very much for bringing up the quote there. That is the text. Thinking about pretending to be a Christian so I can tell Christians how bad they are at being Christian and they'll have to listen to me. End quote. James Lindsay. Mr. Blank says, pray harder and it'll get better is the quintessential ghost dancing as described by the distributist. Yeah, I mean, distributist, great. I even used that illustration in the book. He was pointing that out when it came to constitutional conservatism, but it's also a great example of what Joel Berry is doing with Christianity. He's using Christianity as a placebo to say we don't have to deal with the problems of our culture or fight back against evil because, well, that's what God does. We lose down here. If God wants us to win, then he'll make that happen. Otherwise, we should just sit down and take it. Again, weird. I don't think Joel probably believes that overall, but that is how he described what Christians should do in the scenario rather than think about how to acquire power and use it for the glory of God. We fundamentally disagree on that issue. Sorry, like that. I'm not going to watch the kid burn in the burning building. I'm going to put the ladder on the side of the house and go get him and then praise God that we were able to save him. Glow in the Dark says, he who prays for miracles all the time will never do any good. God empowers his people if we're to move personally, prepare for judgment. Again, I agree 100%. You have to take action. You can't just sit there and tell me, okay, well, I guess ultimately, we're just going to have to wait for God to do things, and otherwise we just sit around and twiddle our thumbs. That's clearly not the example of any Christian magistrate previously, and Joel is just he's not familiar with political or Christian history. Replace my batteries, please. Was hoping to see Joel versus Auron, but alas, it was Joel versus Tim. Also, the Daily Wire ladies think you look nice, but I thought you were. Oh, didn't think you looked nice, but I thought you were handsome. They should have lit you better. Well, thank you, I guess. I mean, I don't know what else to say other than, Aristotle was right about emotional, constancy, I guess. But Glow in the Dark says, a king is only supposed to respond directly to the most dire situations, not every day today. There is more so for God, King of Kings. Kings delegate. Yeah, again, God has not told you that he will fix everything without human action. That is decidedly the opposite of what God has said. He's made us stewards over the earth. He's put us in charge of families, put us in charge of countries, put us in charge of institutions. It is our job to use them for his will, not our job to sit around and say, oh, well, whenever it's something I don't want to do, we'll just say God has to do it. Joe McDermott says, what is the optimal Machiavellian response to Joel and James? How do we move people past their influence? Again, I think as other people have already said, that's already kind of happening. James has largely alienated everyone. He's made videos to that effect that he can't really get invites to things or, involve himself anymore because he's burned bridges and you can't run around telling everybody you hate them and they're stupid and they're crazy and they're woke and then expect to get invites to things. So I think that's kind of solved itself. Barry will continue to have some level of influence due to the B being kind of the only game when it comes to mainstream right-wing comedy. And I think he's just a generally more likable person than James. If you meet Joel in person, like I said, perfectly nice. I'm sure he's a good father. I'm sure he's a good husband. So he'll continue to kind of be around. But I think it would probably be smart, honestly, if he and Seth Dillon from Babylon Bee just kind of remembered that they're comedians and stop doing the Jon Stewart thing where we do the clown nose on, clown nose off. I'm a very, very serious actor when I'm debating, but the minute I say something stupid or I get in trouble, oh, I'm a comedian. It's a joke. It's a joke. Don't you know it's a joke? I've got my clown nose on. I think it would just be better if they went back to being clowns. And I say that with no disrespect. The world needs good clowns. I think they're good clowns. So just be that. Just be funny. You don't have to keep stepping on every landmine, especially when it's very clear that you're just kind of out of your depth in some of these issues. Again, I don't say that to disparage. I've watched Dave Smith as a comedian out debate several professional political pundits. But Joel's got to up his game. And to be fair, sometimes Dave does make some flubs just because he's not aware of all kind of the underlying stuff. But he has read political theory. He is a Mises guy. He's read a lot of economic and political theory, so he at least has that undergirding. I don't think James, or rather, I don't think Joel has much of that. Philosophical Thirstworm says the things people say and project into the ether, into the atmosphere, are more important than actions. But talking about dropping bombs is okay. Yeah, again, very confusing as to which standard we are being held to there, or Joel is holding himself to there. He also says, ironically, doing a classical lib rain dance, hoping for God to solve everything, is more pagan than discerning your proper God-given role and action. Yeah, I think that's actually true. That's a good point there. Thuggo says, off topic, what happened with MTG? Was this a setup? I'll be honest, I really don't know. For those who don't know, Marjorie Taylor Greene has been at war to some extent with Donald Trump. She started this journey as kind of being the standout MAGA congressional representative, going to J6 prisoners and things, and standing up for them. I think she made a lot of good points, fought a lot of good fights, but she also was making some tactically unwise moves when it came to going after Donald Trump. People might say, oh, well, that's just, you're just saying you have to be loyal to Trump. No, but I am saying there's a way to go about that was more tactically sound, that I don't think she did. And apparently that ended up putting her in a position where she felt she wanted to step down. She claimed it was because she couldn't get the work done that she wanted to do. At least that's what I saw. Maybe she ultimately felt that being on the right side of Trump made it difficult for her to get reelected, be effective in Congress, those kind of things. Either way, she seems to have stepped away. Is it a setup? Is it a psyop? I don't know. I genuinely don't. I probably won't read anything into it outside of she was probably had a good heart on certain issues, but was tactically unwise. Ended up making some bad decisions, including going on to liberal channels and bad mouthing the right while doing that. And I think that ultimately kind of sealed her fate. She probably had the support of her constituents until she did that part. And that's probably what drove her into a bad position. Altheist says going if demographics, Zoomer and millennials will have a bigger vote share by 2028, change is coming. That's true. However, remember also that demographically, those generations are less and less founding American stock. So yes, they will. In the Republican primary, perhaps you will see a representation of a new right. But in general elections, you will see, when the boomers die, frankly, America is going to get less white. And just statistically, the people who are voting for the Democrats are immigrants, minorities, these kind of things. So I wouldn't bet too much on that generational turnover for your wins at the end of the day. And then he says bigger than boomers by 2028. So just correcting that point. I see. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you very much. All right, guys. Looks like that's the end of our questions from the people. Lots of them. So thank you very much for jumping on today. Like I said, hopefully there will be another debate with Joel and we can actually work this out, have a more clear exchange, something less focus on personalities and how James Lindsay's been behaving, and more about what I think are fundamental political realities that Joel is just not able to grasp, does not have the background to grasp, needs to, be a little more clarified for him before he would be able to kind of understand where other people are coming from. So we're going to wrap this up, but thank you everybody for watching. If it's your first time on YouTube, you need to subscribe, click the bell, turn on notifications so you know when we go live. If you want to get these broadcasts as podcasts, you need to subscribe to our MacIntyre show on your favorite podcast platform. If you do, leave your rating or review. It really helps with the algorithm magic. And really appreciate you guys watching. As always, I will talk to you next time.